practical skills to well-being, strengthening the role that food access is a critical component of successful reentry. So Andrew. Andrew? Quietly. Okay, come on.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. And thank you for that very kind introduction. I didn't know my picture was going to be put on the screen. I picked a different one. Yes, we are here today. The title of the panel, again, is Cultivating Justice in Modern Food Systems. To echo Randy, just thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for being here today. And thank you to our panelists, who I'd like to invite up right now, for being with us today. Want to come on up?
Yes. It's just a stick. Move it around. Yeah.
Okay, again, thank you for being here. To kick it off, I was hoping we could just go down the line. If you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the organizations that you're representing today. Kick it off.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Jill, for the introduction and for the invitation. My name is Shalay Versi, and I'm an associate professor of psychology at Fordham University.
I'm Anne-Laure, and I am an associate research scholar at NYC's Department of Nutrition and Food Studies.
I got my own now. I'm Spencer King. I am the program area manager for New York Sunworks. I am based in Brooklyn, but we're all over New York.
Very cool. So, Spencer, if we could start with you. Can you please tell us a little bit more about New York Sunworks, what the goals of the organization are, and specifically which issues in the food system is your work attempting to address?
Yeah, so at New York Sunworks, we build and maintain hydroponic systems in school classrooms. If you're not familiar, hydroponics are a form of farming which doesn't use any soil. We use artificial lights and systems. And hydroponic systems can look like anything, but we use pumps and timers and water nutrients to stimulate growing indoors as well as outdoors. We use these hydroponic systems in school classrooms to teach about the science of sustainability, K through 12 schools, some community colleges as well. Give students an opportunity to get some hands-on learning with their science education. So all of our systems that we're working with in schools have a standard aligned curriculum that we send to schools as well. So they are able to kind of plug and play with their standard science education that they're doing day to day in their schools and grow food from seed to harvest while they are doing it. So I think really the angle that we're addressing is the education piece within food systems and allowing students to feel empowered as members of society who are able to actually make that change and to see the importance of science and sustainability and understand where climate change fits into their lives and the piece that they are able to control.
So specifically, I work on a project called After Share NYC, and it started out in 2021 was really when it launched as this kind of first census of urban ag in New York. The idea was that, especially during the COVID pandemic, sort of food crisis in New York was really heightened, and urban agriculture serves as this sort of like stopgap in a way where people can grow their own food, start to learn about maybe a little bit more like community resilience, community projects to maintain health and food access and education in New York City. And because there wasn't like a baseline of information on urban ag in New York, there wasn't really this bar that you can hold the city to say like, we need this to improve, this is the baseline, this is what we want to grow, these are the metrics that help us determine if we're being supported adequately or not. So that was the first iteration, but it really depended on like growers themselves entering the data, and a lot of growers did not. And so I came onto the project trying to figure out how we could build something that growers were more interested in using and therefore would provide data for. And so our new platform integrates resource sharing. That's a really big thing that growers mentioned in the city. Like, people want to advocate for urban ag in the big picture and try to figure out a way to get more sustainable like funding and resources from the city and private organizations, but they also really want to support each other. And so now our platform, which just launched, if you are in urban ag and want to download it and check it out, we would love your feedback. It allows you not only to share your information, but also to say, I have extra wood chips. If you want wood chips, I have extra seedlings. I can provide education as a service, and people can connect with each other, can support each other, and hopefully build a more resilient system in which we're not so dependent on just the big picture.
Hi, and I come to this work really thinking about how people are investing in their own community systems. So similar to Emily, I started a project around 2020 at the height of COVID that was focused primarily on Black and brown farmers in cities who are growing food. And that took the form of something that we called the Black Farmer Project. And it started in the DMV area, and then of course we did farmers in the Bronx. Now we have farmers across 5 states. And thinking about how Black farmers during that time were providing food and sustenance to people in their communities, but also how they continue to do that in the face of lots of financial challenges, climate change, and shifting federal and government regulations that makes funding of both rural farming but also urban ag increasingly difficult. And so we collected all of these interviews. They're kind of like oral histories, and we are going to have them on a website, and sort of thinking about this as a digital storytelling platform, because connecting with technology, we think it's important to sort of provide a backdrop to who's actually doing some of this work. So that's what that project is about.
Very cool, thank you. Before we move on to the next question, I just want to say and plug the app a little bit. AgriShare, definitely, if you're a grower or would like to be a grower, download the app and start using it. We have at our horticulture program at Fortune, and it's great. So, a little shout out there. So, next question, to turn back to Spencer. We know that you have experience with AI, and specifically integrating AI into nonprofit operations. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you use AI specifically in your work?
Yeah, so we got introduced to the idea of AI for social good, or AI for nonprofits, through the Tech NYC AI for nonprofits cohort that we were in with Fortune Society. The way that we have been using it and the way that we came into it was like in a very skeptical way. We are all, I think, people who approach AI and big tech in a very hesitant way, and we wanted to see how we could offload the more repetitive and tedious things that we do, and offload that work to AI, so that the work that we're doing that needs to be human-centered and person-centered and actually use most of our attention and our care, we could have more time and capacity to actually do that. So right now it's looking more like we are using AI to handle big, messy data. We have a lot of reports that we need to look through on a day-to-day basis. It allows us to look through that much more quickly. As part of that cohort too, we also created an AI policy for our organization, which I think was important for us to get an understanding about how we're viewing it not necessarily as an inevitability, but we're also not completely ignoring it. So we have a plan in place moving forward. no matter how it develops.
Thanks. So maybe not specifically about AI, but I would like to pose the same question to Anne-Lauren Chalet. How do you guys use tech in your work? How does it influence your work?
So tech, not necessarily AI.
In general, however tech, comes into play in your life, whatever that means to you.
So for this project specifically, tech was not a central component. I was sitting down talking to people, visiting farms basically in community gardens, and talking to people about their day-to-day farming practices and how they felt that sort of aligned with a greater community good and food justice agenda. So the tech actually comes into play with telling the story digitally, and so it was enriching for me, but oftentimes oral histories, interviews can stay, behind a paywall or somewhere where people don't really read them. So the translational aspect of this work was really trying to make it accessible to anyone who has a computer. You go to eventually foodxhousing.com, which is where these oral histories will live, and there'll be the full oral histories, but there'll also be little transcripts. So anyone who wants to learn more about these farmers' everyday lives, they can, but also for research purposes, if people are interested in researching agricultural practices, both in rural and urban contexts, that will be available.
Yeah, so tech is complicated because it was central, of course, to this project. We're using an app. This is a very much technology-based intervention, but it's also kind of an obstacle. So the reason the first iteration was not very used is because a lot of urban farmers, there's different reasons that people don't want to engage in technology necessarily. Some of it is you go to the garden because you don't want to be on your phone. You want to be with the earth. Some of it is also related to access. Like our first iteration of our platform was on a computer, and when we were redesigning this, our whole project was based on participatory design. So it was all like interviews and workshops with growers to get feedback on what people's priorities were, what obstacles were to data entry, what feelings people had about data in general. And a lot of people were like, we don't have computers and we aren't going to leave the field and then try to find a computer to enter the data. So that's why we made it a mobile app, because more people have phones than computers. So technology is this really complicated thing. It's like, it can be an intervention, it can be helpful, it can allow people to connect, and also, in our case, it was maybe sometimes like a bit of an obstacle as well. So we just tried to make it as simple as possible as a survey so that people don't have to spend a lot of time on their phone. They can enter their data and move on, and also have it be on the phone, and also emphasize like the connection over the data itself, and allows more space for people to share information they want to share and not share what they don't want to share, so that it doesn't feel like they're just entering their information into the void of technology, if that makes sense.
Now, you kind of spoke to my next question a bit, but we talked about how technology can be used to, correct me if I'm wrong, but memorialize and amplify histories of farmers, how it can be used as with data. And that's open to anybody and everybody.
I have the mic. I can speak to this also possibly beyond urban ag a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in urban ag, I think that people, like another slight obstacle is that people have a little bit of discomfort around sharing information. We just live in an age in which there's so much information on all people, and it's nice to protect some of that privacy. I wouldn't say that's a detriment. I think there's actually ways that we can use these technologies and really use them to advocate for ourselves and support ourselves. But I think when there's a gap between education and empowerment and autonomy in technology, that I think a lot of us just don't have the level of like autonomy in our use of technology that allows us to be like empowered users, if that makes sense. But then in agriculture, my background is rural farming, and so like, more production agriculture than small scale. And I think when you're competing against this like hyper optimized system in which you have industrial ag that increasingly uses on technology and everything is like highly optimized, that doesn't really translate well to the human scale world. And I think it makes it harder and harder and harder for small scale farmers to kind of keep up. And so I think it can maybe replicate some of these inequities in the system.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think some of the things that came up in our interviews with people who just wanted to grow food, like the whole idea was food sovereignty. We just want to, like there's a plot or there's a vacant lot next to my building and I just want to like grow food there. I think the level of bureaucracy and challenge in terms of, well, you have to go online and apply for this thing or you have to submit paperwork in order to do this one thing that seems very basic and simplistic does feel like it's a bit of a detriment. So I think maybe simplifying and streamlining the role of tech would help, I think, in terms of scaling people's involvement in urban ag and just growing food and facility.
Coffee. Which one is regular coffee?
Light roast, dark roast.
Ooh, that's good. Thank you. Hope it's French. Oh.
Basically a wrench. You could rebuild an engine with a wrench and a couple, tools that you would find in your toolbox. But as cars have gotten more advanced, you're no longer able to just work on it yourself. You have to work with it. Our right to repair has really diminished in recent years. And I think the way that I'm relating that back to the work that we do is that we try to keep our systems very low tech. Commercial hydroponics, you would see things like completely automated systems. You could theoretically let it run by itself with very little human intervention. We like to keep things low tech because it reduces that distance between the user and the actual thing that's being done so that people understand how things work. So I see that a lot in the food system as well, where these products are being sold to us that are supposed to make things easier, but when things get too easy and you reduce the friction too much, I think we lose something in that interaction where we're no longer actually able to understand the work that we're doing or understand the mechanics of it and understand the impacts that we're having.
Very interesting, thank you. We did want to leave a bit of time for Q&A from the audience. No time?
No questions, yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, before we get there, I did just want to give you guys the opportunity to plug any work, any projects, how the audience could get involved in the work, and that's open to everybody. And if you do have any questions out in the audience, just raise your hand and call you up. Or scan the QR code. It is the 10th fair, so scan the QR code and submit a question.
Well, I don't have anything to plug, but I will say that these oral histories will be online this summer, so they will be linked to my website, and the Google search will bring me up, and hopefully people will use it.
I think I've sort of already shamelessly plugged it a few times in this panel, but the AgriShare NYC app is available in your app store. It's also available online as agrishare.nyc. So if you prefer a computer version, you can check it out there. Otherwise, you can download it. If you're a farmer or grower, please sign up and join. Even if you're not, you can use it to learn about growing spaces in New York. Thanks.
And I think we'll have some materials.
Yeah, and I have, there's some one-pagers in the corner, and there's also like a guide to entering your data on the computer version.
Check it out.
If you have any school-age kids and you don't already have a hydroponic lab in their classroom, you can always check us out at nysunworks.org. And we're happy to be in discussion with your school to see what we can do to get one in there.
Okay. Last call for any questions from the audience.
She mentioned like family, origin for farmer house, farmer family.
It's on.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My question to Annie, you mentioned you grown from family, a farmer family.
No, I used to work in a rural farm.
Oh, I thought that you're from farmer family background.
My family's not farmers. I farmed.
Oh.
But my parents.
So my family from farmers origin, I born there. So my question was how AI affect the farmers?
AI, yeah.
And
Oh, I can use this. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I feel like this is almost too big a question for someone like me. Like it's such a, we don't have all the information yet, and I definitely don't know everything about the way AI is impacting agriculture. I think from the outside and from sort of like what I've read or experienced in a limited way, first of all, I'll just echo what Shley had mentioned, which is there is the land problem. Like that's one of the biggest issues with farmland, especially in America, where it's like super expensive to own land and increasingly owned by a few small organizations. And so competing with data centers is a challenge, and also increased like pollution of our systems is a challenge for farmers. So I think just like the environmental perspective of AI worries me when it comes to our food systems and food sovereignty. But in terms of the impact on farmers, I mean, I think we're seeing some possibly useful applications of AI, like some really interesting ways in which AI is helping people plan their planting and helping people respond to pests and respond to challenges. I think there's probably a long ways to go until that stuff is accessible for like a small, not wealthy farmer. But this is just from my not completely informed perspective on this.
Anything else to add?
Any more questions? No?
Hello, test.
No, you gotta use the microphone. Try to tell them. Gotta go back. Can't hear him.
On the building, they want to have like lawn, so that we plants and stuff. The mic went on it?
It's good. You guys just speak.
That's a great question. I know a very little about that, but I do know, speaking from the amount of greenhouses that we have built, there's sort of a structural barrier to entry with that because there has to be a full structural assessment of the rooftop before you're putting things on top of the roof, especially like soil that's getting wet gets very, very heavy very fast. But we have seen just on a larger scale green roofs implemented in other cities around the world, and the effect that it has on like the heat island effect and the amount that it cools city centers is pretty remarkable. So I would hope to see more of that.
And I just echo that NYC piloted a program where they did rooftop gardens on some developments, which I think should be expanded, scaled, and invested in, because we do see the community gardens, again, that are situated in NYC developments do very well. And I think that's just a test case for what the city could do.
And I see that there are other questions out there, but please, if you could submit them via the QR code.
Can I just say it out loud?
That'd be great.
Okay.
And also, we gotta wrap it up. Do we have time for one more?
Nope.
Okay. Apologies, but feel free to come to us afterwards.
Yeah.
We're here.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
They can't share the mic with them. You gotta have separate mics for the people that's doing the thing, and then for us. They only got 2 microphones, so I'm about to when they finish.
I'll submit it to them. I'll send you an answer.
So let's give it up for our panelists. And before we proceed to our next panel, I just want to say that our cleanliness
I wanted to know.
for like nutrition and
I live in
health,
an apartment building.
it's something that we all
How
struggle
can
with.
they?
And when we talk
Do I
about
have to
the
ask
justice
permission from the
community,
building
having
to
access
have the farming
to
on our
nutrition
balcony?
plays a substantial role in getting settled in society and just being able to like stabilize yourself and
Also,
rebuild
the
your
other
life.
question,
So when we talk
I
about
noticed that there's
technology and
urban
access to
gardens
health and
around my
nutrition is something
community,
that,
but
you know,
it's
we think about
inaccessible
and
to
hopes-
the
I hope
average
that
person.
some of the things they talk
How do
about
we get
today
into
on this
these?
panel will
Sign
inspire
up.
us to have our own personal conversations. Okay. And so I want to go into our next panel. And our next panel is decoding pathways to today's job market. And the moderator for this panel is Robert Weinstein. We call him Bob. And it's Bob. And it's the honor to speak about Bob. Yeah. And I'm super honored to introduce Bob because like since I've been at Fortune, I've watched all the work that Bob does. And he does really, really great work. He connects with the community and he really helps at baseline. And I see the work he does. So without further ado, I'm gonna, give a little bio on him, but I'm just super excited to introduce Bob. So let you guys know. So Bob is the Director of Education and Work Readiness at the Fortune Society, right, which leads programs that prepare individuals impacted by the criminal legal system for long-term employment and career development. Since joining Fortune in 2021, he has advanced from employment specialist to program leadership, helping to strengthen workforce development services across the organization. Bob designs and facilitates engaging hands-on curricula through career development workshops that equip participants with the skills to secure and sustain employment. Drawing on a multidisciplinary background in education, client relations, and the arts, he brings a creative, practical approach to workforce readiness. With no further ado, Bob, would you come on up?
Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who are in my workshop at Fortune, I will be taking attendance at the end. I am thrilled to be here and to have been asked to moderate the final conversation of this 5th annual Tech Fair. And joining me on the dais here are some distinguished colleagues who I just recently met several months ago, but one of whom is actually here who is replacing one of our panelists who unfortunately emailed me this morning and said she is sick. So Jason was good enough at the very last minute to step in, and Jason, in fact, is one of our exhibitors if you haven't checked out his station over there, but he'll have a chance to introduce. So what I'm going to do is ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. They'll give you just a little brief background, and then we're going to dig into a couple of questions that I think a lot of you in the audience are going to want to listen for. Okay?
Hello, everyone. I'm Vera Fisk. I'm currently a recruiter at the Upper Manhattan Workforce One Center in Harlem, and prior to that, I was the employment specialist supervisor at Fortune. So I'm passionate about helping New Yorkers, job seekers find the job opportunities that fit with them and can help them kind of move to where they want to be in life. And that's what I get to do every day.
It's awesome.
All right, let's try this. Good afternoon. Or more time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
There we go. How's it going? My name is Jason Barefoot. I'm the head of government accounts here at Emerge Career. I'm very honored to be selected to be on the panel at the last minute, and I'm excited to share about the work that we're doing. Emerge Career is a AI-powered workforce development and reentry platform, and we focus on getting folks ready to join in the skilled trades careers. We are the partner with the New York City Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice for the Next Mile NYC program. That is training folks with any justice involvement. We operate with folks in Rikers, probation. 30 years ago, you had to run with the police. Doesn't matter. We'll get you trained and placed into a trucking job. And the average starting salary for folks coming out of Next Mile is $90,000. We operate other vocational programs like HVAC technicians, diesel and EV mechanics across the country. So I'm excited to talk about our work, but that's me and that's Emerge Career.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bartley Blakeman. I flew in this morning from Austin, Texas to be here. So, long trip. Excited to be here with you all. I am formerly incarcerated, so I was a homeless teenager for 2.5 years before going to prison in Georgia for drug trafficking and grand theft. That was when I was 18 years old. I got my GED while I was in the Georgia Department of Corrections. And I'm the founder of a company called Honest Jobs. Honest Jobs was the nation's leading fair chance employment platform. So we worked with about 1,500 companies across the nation, helping them hire people with felonies. And 3 months ago, I sold that company, successfully sold the company, which is pretty amazing for me. And I now work for the company that acquired my business as director of business development, leading sales, mostly selling to state governments. Let's see, after getting my GED in prison, I did go on and get a business degree from Ohio State University, where I graduated with honors with a business degree, but got rejected about 70, 80 times because the background after earning my business degree, and that's when I decided I was going to build something for myself, start my own business, and hopefully I'll bring knowledge from building a technology company and share some of that today. Thank you all.
Thank you. So decoding pathways to today's job market is the title of this session. I just wanted to give you a little description of what we're here to discuss. This session is going to explore how job seekers can navigate an increasingly competitive employment landscape shaped by, of course, emerging technologies and changing employer expectations and unequal access to opportunity. As online applications become more crowded and automated, the panel will examine the particular challenges faced by non-traditional candidates, bringing together perspectives from workforce development, inclusive hiring, re-entry employment, and recruiting. This conversation will look at professionalism, networking, and the practical digital tools that can help job seekers overcome barriers to successful employment. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is ask each of the panelists a question. The way I'd like to start is with the term professionalism. What does it take today to be professional with today's technology? How does one identify themselves as professional with technology? Would anyone like to start us off?
Good. Give this up to somebody. Well, I'm not gonna. Feel free to throw it back to me. I'm gonna just share like one or two little things real quick. But one of the things that I learned very quickly, I worked for myself for 7 years, and when I sold my business, I'm now working as an employee again at a much larger company. And one of the things I've learned is, you don't need to know it all. You need to embrace feedback and learn quickly. And as someone who came from poverty, came from prison, came from trauma background, feedback and criticism is really tough. Sometimes I just want to shut down and leave and just be like, man, this isn't right for me. I've learned that feedback is a gift, especially when someone gives it to you from a position where you want to be. You want to be where they are. If they criticize you or give feedback, take that feedback as a great opportunity to learn. And then the other piece of professionalism that I want to point out is most valuable is reliability. Like, actually do what you say you're going to do when you do it. That's what really decides if you're a professional, is I do what I said I'm going to do when I said I was going to do it. And if I don't, I'm going to communicate to you before I didn't do it and explain why it's not going to get done on time. So those things really is what I believe defines a professional.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would double click on that point about consistency, reliability. One thing that we emphasize with our students is along the training process, being consistent, showing up to every stage of the career path journey. And we work with students actually to get them ready for each stage along the way. And one of the cool tools that we've built is a AI-powered resume developer. So you can actually, in our platform, just speak to your experiences, say the things that you've done, and our tool will actually generate a resume based on your experience that is ready to go out the door in PDF form for your next interview. And that's a great way to show up with the materials that you need to be as professional as you can before you have an interview. So it's totally agree about consistency and also having the right materials in hand when you're in front of a hiring manager.
So I think something that is really important about professionalism, especially when it comes to technology, is realizing how many different aspects that can affect. It's your email address, it's how you send the email, it's do you have an email signature, your resume, your LinkedIn, it's so many different aspects of things, which I know can be overwhelming, but I think it's important that you have kind of a cohesive image over all of those areas, that you're communicating how you want to present yourself, which of course partially depends on the kind of employment you're seeking. You know, in different industries and fields, you're gonna be aiming to have a different type of presence, to be perceived in a different way. But I think a lot of times people focus in on specific things and then can miss out on those other areas. But I would say definitely communication, via email, text, whatever it may be, is a huge part of professionalism. And I think one of the ways that you have the most control over how you're perceived and how you are considered for job opportunities.
Sabina, our panelist who was not able to be here, when we had some conversations in planning for today, she spoke very eloquently about how if you really want to be a professional in today's marketplace, you really have to look at yourself, who you are, and who you really want to be. How do you want to present yourself? How do you want to perceive how do you want others to perceive you? And she was very adamant about that. And that's why I kind of wanted to speak a little bit about professionalism, because before you even get into some of the technology, and we're going to talk about barriers and how to kind of address some of those barriers in a minute, but you really have to look at the way you want to be perceived by others out there. And in fact, Vera mentioned even something as basic as setting up a professional email address. Many of us have multiple email addresses for the different personas that we have, right? Different hats that we wear or roles that we play in life. But when it comes to competing for today's jobs, you've got to really look at, how do I become that professional self? So part of it is motivation. Part of it is self-discipline, right? And that's what Sabina really wanted to convey had she have been here today. What I want to now ask each of the panelists to kind of talk about is, what are some of the barriers that, in particular, justice-impacted individuals are facing, and how can they work towards overcoming some of those barriers?
Sure, yeah, I'll kick it off. And there's no real easy way to say this, so if it's offensive, I'm not talking to you, okay? I'd say the biggest barrier is excuses, to be honest. I've just met too many people in this space. I've worked in probably 15 prisons, gone in and talked to guys. The biggest barrier is going to be excuses. The people who always find a way to solve the problem rather than find an excuse are the people that succeed. They find a way to just keep moving forward. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, doesn't mean it's going to happen quickly, doesn't mean it's going to happen the way you think, but excuses are your enemy. Like, you just got to find a way to not let an excuse end your momentum. Keep going. Another thing, this kind of speaks to your personal image. You can't be seen as a professional if you don't believe you're a professional. Like, you have to reinvent yourself. So you got to find out somebody who you identify with. You're like, man, I want to be like that guy. Think back to being a kid and being like, I want to be like MJ. I want to be like this person. You do everything to try to be like them. You need to figure out that tech executive or that CEO of a company and be like, how do I be like this guy? and like literally try to live like them, look like them, do what they did. And you got to get over the idea that like it's corny or it's not cool or I look weird doing that. You're going to look great when you're a millionaire or when you got the nice house and they don't. So I think those are some of the biggest challenges. Another one we mentioned it a little bit is the online professionalism. Look, sometimes people won't even do a background check. They'll just Google your name and look at your Instagram account. They'll be like, nope. Like that is that easy to weed you out if they're looking at your Instagram, your Twitter, or your online presence. So clean up your online stuff. You can have a personal life that's fun and all that stuff, but just keep it offline. And then the last thing I'd share is if you're looking for a job, 2 parts. You got to be able to talk about your skills, your experience, work that you've done, even if you haven't had that job. So if you're a coder, you're learning how to code, you're writing software, you don't have to have had a software development job to have an online portfolio where you're able to point to this and say, here's 3 websites that I personally made. If you're working on design, you have a design portfolio. If you're in sales, do door-to-door sales part-time. Anybody can get a door-to-door sales commission-only sales job and then talk about how you hit your quota, how you got those sales. In today's tech world, they're not going to teach you on the job everything. They want you to show that you came with initiative, you can speak the language, you've got some experience. So that's what I would say. And then focus on, if your record is holding you back, especially if it's a felony, focus on small businesses or startups. This is just from personal experience. I told the truth and got in, I lied and got in. A lot of different ways I got into jobs that were with small businesses where Fortune 500s, they're almost always doing a background check and they have a very rigid process. They have a very hard time getting you through that process. A small 20-person company though, it's one person. They just say yes or they say no, but it's not like a big bureaucratic system that's really hard to change. Sorry for going so long.
Yeah. I wanna like really reemphasize something, and it goes back to professionalism. We at Emerge always see attitude as a barrier and a force multiplier. And we say that a student with a really solid attitude can get anything done, can make anything happen. And I think that goes to professionalism. Professionalism is the attitude of I can do it, of I will make it happen. I will show up, I will be there, I will finish the job, and I will get through the course. And this is where it goes to, it is a very competitive market, but for us, we actually see that there are dozens, hundreds of employers looking to hire folks in the skilled trades. And I know this is we have a tech model, but for the folks that are willing to show up and do the work, it's a great career path and an amazing opportunity. Interestingly, I think one of the barriers that cuts both ways, you see for young folks, maybe under 35 in our cohorts, the digital access components are not a barrier and are very digitally fluent. They're really able to plug into the online courses and manage our online software. For folks who are a little older, it is a barrier and face other challenges getting access to the internet and those as barriers. And I think any efforts to expand those opportunities for this population, it would be really valuable to continue, expanding internet access, making sure folks have it both in home or in the community. So 2 parts there for barriers, but I think attitude to the point made earlier is really important. And professionalism is an adjective that says I can do it.
Yeah, I would just add, I think from a perspective of a recruiter and, being an employment specialist, some of the more like day-to-day things tend to be, people missing out on opportunities because they didn't check their email that day. They didn't listen to the voicemail was not set up. I know if you're in Bob's workshop right now, you're probably getting a lot of that. But yeah, being consistent, which I know was mentioned earlier, being responsive, part of, the kind of direction things are moving in because of tech is the kind of expectation that maybe you have a week to respond to an email from an interviewer, hiring manager, or an application response. Realistically, that has turned into like maybe, I would say 2 days at most. So I think that's something that it takes a lot of people to get used to. Checking your email every single day, twice a day, being on top. The number of times I send out emails to people, like, I have an interview for you tomorrow, you're gonna get the job. but they don't see it soon enough, so, and that's also meeting the recruiters or, employment specialists, wherever your support is, where they're at. I'm working with hundreds of people, I can't call every single person who's waiting to hear from me for a job opportunity. I have to send an email blast. So I think that is definitely something that's huge in terms of just barriers and consistent contact information is definitely huge. People go through a lot of things. Your phone number changes, you lose your phone, whatever happens, you can't get access to your email, you have to make a new one. But the most important thing is following up on that, getting that updated as soon as possible. Basically just not allowing any space for you to miss out on a chance that is that easily solvable. I also think something just to note is, which I hope I'm not like getting too ahead of myself, but the reality is this is a very tough job market, and things are really moving heavily towards everything being online, applications, all of those, AI, reading resumes and all of those things. I think that is in certain ways balances the field, because even people who have all of the tech experience and skills in the world are also facing similar challenges of being up against hundreds of other applicants. So I think one thing is kind of to go to how to get around that is the importance of in-person networking, utilizing your resources. If you are, you're a part of the employment services program at Fortune, Workforce One, those kind of resources, not that those should be your only resources, but as ways to just get in front of a human and get out of that, pile of 100 resumes that's just being reviewed by AI.
Yeah, and to something that Vera just said about kind of getting into certain routines, certain habits, like checking your email, checking your voicemail. Today's job market is moving so rapidly, and it is very competitive. It's not that there aren't jobs out there. There's plenty of jobs out there. But in order to compete for those jobs, you really have to set up a whole set of routines and be very, very structured and very disciplined. Your job search, and I say this when I teach my workshops, is when you are in a position to look for jobs, you've got to make that job search your full-time job, right? Which implies waking up at a certain time of day, setting up a schedule. But in terms of technology, getting into the routine of checking those emails, checking those voicemails, making sure that you have a proper voicemail greeting so that when an employer does call you, they're not getting the internal phone's voice, but your voice with your phone number so that they know that they've reached a real person. Little things like that definitely speak to the concept of professionalism, but it's all about who do you want to be, who do you want to represent, and having that discipline and having that structure and these positive habits is what's going to really help you compete in the workplace. I want to now talk a little bit about where things are headed in terms of technology, because technology, as many of our previous panelists who came up here to talk with you had mentioned, that things are constantly evolving. 5 years from now, maybe even less, the way we search for jobs, the way companies recruit people will be different than it is right now. So where are employers headed in terms of recruiting, getting people onboarded? What are some of the emerging technologies that we have to be prepared for, and that we even have to develop the skills for?
Yeah, it's an interesting question for me. Obviously, we are a skills-based trades company where we're training folks to be placed into organizations and career paths that are predominantly in hands-on kind of low-tech environments. But I do think that the work that we're doing at Emerge is really, emphasized by our infusion with technology. So like I mentioned, we have a resume developer. We have an online chatbot where as you're going through the course, you can ask various questions along the way to understand concepts more deeply. It is going to be a situation where everything will be technology infused going forward. But that does not mean that career paths that are outside of the tech space will be falling to the wayside. And in fact, you see a lot of reports in our fields that skills-based trades are expanding, and that the access to those opportunities will become more and more as time goes on and people age out of the careers right now with folks who aren't ready to join that labor force. So I do think that you have a bit of divergence there where there's a lot of competition on the tech side and folks who are going into tech companies that are growing and expanding and becoming a larger part of the market. And also on the trade side, we see a ton of demand and increased demand in the future for folks going into those fields. So definitely opportunities on both sides, but definitely for us in skilled trades.
Real quick, I just want to say something about Jason and the fact that his organization helps people get skilled trade jobs. First off, I think for probably the largest merge of skilled trades and technology in history is happening right now, where AI is completely dependent on electricians, maintenance technicians, welders to power the whole thing. Like right now, electricians are making hundreds of thousands of dollars getting paid bank to work their own hours. They can show up in whatever clothes they want to wear. They can cuss if they want. They can do whatever they want. That's just the reality of skilled trades right now. I say all that. I just wanted to highlight that. Like, if you're not feeling tech after this, like, check out skilled trades because it's a booming career. Now, the other thing I wanted to share was that how many of you have heard this? I don't know who it came from originally, but I've heard it a couple times now, and I think it's so true. Is AI won't take your job, but someone using AI probably will. Yeah. Okay, so that's the truth. Is it's already happening. We're seeing it everywhere that companies are hiring. Or they're not hiring, they're like letting employees slowly quit over time, but not necessarily hiring as much. So there are jobs out there, absolutely. But AI is making it easier for one person to do the job of multiple people. So, I don't know that Fortune has a position on this, but I have a position on this, so I'm going to share it. Is that if you don't have an AI model on your phone, go to the App Store, it's free. Download the OpenAI app, ChatGPT, or Claude Code, and start using it. Just ask it questions and you're going to be blown away by it, and just you got to play with it a lot before you really know how to use it. Always sense check its work. You got to read it before you copy and paste it into an email and click send. But me and every other professional I know, especially high performing professionals, are using it dozens of times a day. I use it so much and it helps me get so much done. So I wanted to highlight that is one of the emerging technologies that obviously if you're going to work in tech, you're going to need to know how to use. At my company I work for, we have a company AI that everyone has been approved to use, and they even train employees on how to use it and when to use it. It is expected. And then obviously, we've already talked about this a lot, but email, calendar, and virtual Zoom calls, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, you got to know how to use those tools if you're going to work with your brain instead of your back. Like if you're going to have a knowledge-based job where you're getting paid to use your brain, you absolutely have to be not just able to use them, but you have to be fluent in those tools. So last thing I'll end with is like when the personal computer came about, Steve Jobs, right, created the Apple computer. So many of these people, when emerging technologies come, they don't have permission to do what they're going to do. They don't have a degree that taught them exactly how to do what they're going to do. When emerging technology comes, it's an opportunity for people who don't have the credential or the resume or the network. If you can learn how to use the emerging technology that's happening right now, AI, it can be a huge help in creating your own company, getting that tech job. So I just happy to answer more questions on AI, but can't overemphasize how valuable it is if you can learn how to use it correctly.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I have my own feelings about AI, but I think the reality is, like Carly mentioned, everyone is using it, and I think, he was speaking about more so when you get the job, but it's also doing the job search. Most people are updating their resume with AI for each different job application. The resume is, definitely the biggest thing, but it is one of those just undeniable forces that you kind of just have to you don't have to embrace it, but you have to use it a little bit probably if you want to be able to keep up. That's just, again, I don't I have no feelings, but I wouldn't want someone to not utilize that to be able to get on the same playing field as everyone else and better themselves and get that opportunity that you're looking for. In terms of where things are going, definitely from the competition, other people applying to jobs using AI for that, and on the employer side of things using AI to screen resumes. I've even seen things are coming where your interview might be with an AI bot, and so that is something that I know to myself and probably a lot of you feels outrageous. You wait all this time to get an interview and you're just talking to an AI bot. But that's just where things are headed. So being prepared for those kind of situations, and making sure that you're not being left behind on that.
That's terrific. Thank you. We do have some questions from the audience. I'm thrilled that people did scan the code. So I'm going to take the time right now to actually ask our panelists some of these great questions here. Here's one. Do employers want to see that you are using AI tools such as ChatGPT, say in your resume or even in your cover letter? So explicitly mentioning that you used AI to increase your work productivity. Can anybody speak to that? Do employers really want to see that you're using AI tools such as ChatGPT?
I would say yes. I think it goes to Harley's question, Harley's point about the fact that everyone's using it and then they're probably using it in their day-to-day work. Very quickly, the short answer, I would say yes, that we have heard from employers, even in skilled trades, but for our work as well, we love seeing that for applicants for our company. So happy to have you all weigh in as well.
Yeah, I think it's a nuanced answer. Like most questions we're going to discuss is, first off, I think of a resume, especially a cover letter, as a bit an intimate experience. It should feel like, oh, this is personalized for me to read. So I talk to a lot of recruiters who say, we're just lost in a sea of AI resumes. Every resume is an AI resume, and we can tell. So when I prompt the AI to write for me, I'll literally tell it, make me sound more normal. I don't want to sound fancy, but the AI helps with just grammar and spelling and formatting. But tell it, don't make me sound fancier than I am. Just give me a resume. So I think those things are important. I wouldn't put on your resume, I use ChatGPT to make this. But if you're interviewing with a technology company and they ask, how have you used technology to be more efficient? It's very common in interviews for people to ask these questions where they're looking for you to give them a real life example. And that's a perfect way, if you are using AI, when they ask you a technology-based question and they're saying, give me an example of a time you did X, Y, or Z, absolutely bring up how you've used AI to get this job interview. I think that's a really valuable thing to share, actually.
Comes to mind, I have in our career development workshops at Fortune, we work with our participants on developing a really good professional resume. We have volunteers and interns that are trained to do that. But I often get asked, Bob, do we get a cover letter when we do this workshop? Are you going to give us a cover letter? And I always say, no, we don't do cover letters, because cover letters really have to be very specific to the job that you're applying for. Not that resumes shouldn't, you should, but here's where, ChatGPT can be used. Say you have a standard cover letter, right? You really want to customize that cover letter for each individual job. All you have to do is go to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, I'd like you to take this cover letter, say it's your version 1.0, and make it more towards residential aid rather than case manager, right? And include this credential or include this skill that I have. You know, of course, you don't want to make things up out of thin air, but what you want to do is you want to give it the key words that you know the employer is looking for. And in 10 seconds, you have a more customized cover letter, right? And to Harley's point, if the cover letter that's produced for you through ChatGPT just sounds a little too sophisticated, then you can go back and say, soften the tone. Could you make it a little, that's just one example of how you can create your own kind of customized cover letters for each individual job. Let me get to another question here. This is for Harley. Okay. This is for Harley, real quick. What software tools do you think an inspiring founder should learn? For example, Excel, ChatGPT, advanced marketing softwares.
It's a bit of a trick question because ultimately the success of an entrepreneur comes down to selling. Like, it's just boots on the ground. You're talking to people, you're pitching them. You got to learn how to get people to give you money. Like, if you're not an entrepreneur if you're not getting money. There's a hobby and then there's a job. And a lot of entrepreneurs are hobbyists for many, many years, but you cross into being an entrepreneur when you actually have someone paying you, especially if they pay you more than once. So the best skill you can learn is how to sell. And when you're an entrepreneur, especially in the tech space, at first you're kind of selling garbage. Whatever it is you made is probably not that good. At first, mine certainly wasn't what I built, and I don't even write code. I built a software company. I didn't know how to code. I worked transparently. I found people with pretty severe criminal histories that couldn't find jobs, but they knew how to code. And I said, hey, I want to build something. Will you work for free until I can figure out how to pay you? And then I ended up paying those people really well, and they got benefits and great pay and everything. But work with what you have, and then I'm gonna answer the question directly. Is once you do have some sales and you do have a product, systems are important. So using some type of customer resource management tool, that's called a CRM. You've probably heard of Salesforce. An easier one to use is called HubSpot. HubSpot, you can get I believe there's a free version, but I've used it for 7-8 years to keep all my customer contacts clean and organized, notes. I can do Zoom calls through HubSpot. It's called HubSpot. And then, if I'm going to try to sell to a customer, the first thing I'm going to do is do a bunch of research on that customer. So when I call them, I know everything about them. So ChatGPT, whatever your AI is, be like, tell me everything I need to. This is what I'm trying to sell. I want to sell to this company. Tell me what I need to know about that. So just get really good at prompting that and studying your customers before you try to sell it to them. Use a CRM to track everything you're doing. Take diligent notes. You can even use a Zoom call note taker, which is something I do now. When I get on a call, I'll ask the customer, like ahead of a DOC, I'll be on a call. Do you mind if I have an AI take notes for us so that I can give you my full attention? And I'll share the notes with you after the call. And you just click the button that says, take AI notes in the top left corner. It's a game changer for following up. If you're in the software space, there's a bunch of tools that can help you build software without knowing how to code really well. You need to know a little bit, but there's a tool called Bubble. Bubble.io. It's like a no-code software builder, but there's a bunch of those. And then from there, I don't get too far into the tech space. I just use like Google Drive for all of my things. So having a professional email, having folders for everything in the business. It's got the Google Sheets, documents, all of that stuff, and start talking about your business publicly. One of the things I think people worry about is they got to keep everything a secret because they don't want somebody to steal it. No one's going to steal your idea. Like, ideas are worth $0. It's all how much work you're going to put into execution. So start talking about it publicly on Instagram, on Snapchat, whatever you do, talk about your business all the time. Make that your identity, and before you know it, people will buy from you.
Thank you. I want to conclude this session by just saying something that our keynote speaker this morning, Trent, offered, and that is, the winner is the person who develops the skills and seeks the knowledge. So if there's anybody sitting among us today who feels that he or she is kind of lacking the tech skills or lacking just the motivation or the wherewithal to compete in today's marketplace, don't be ashamed of that. What you need to do is ask for help. Take the classes that are offered. Fortune has lots of digital equity classes that are offered. Other places that we partner with have lots of classes. Don't fall behind. Don't be that dinosaur, as you heard used today. Go after it. Be assertive, and don't ever be ashamed of asking for help, because technology is just constantly moving. And today, you got to keep up with that. Would you all give a round of applause to our panelists for today? And I also want to mention, if you haven't checked out Emerge Careers, Jason has a station over there, and check out honestjobs.com, right? Harley founded that several years ago. Take a look at it, because it is designed to support justice impacted individuals. I think you might find it pretty fascinating, right? Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great job, Bob.